entire lesson is going to be working on writing the equation of a line given different amounts of information. So our whole do now is sort of refueling and leading us there. For number one, we're going to write an equation in slope-intercept form for the information given below. So we know slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where our m is our slope, our rate of change, our rise over our run, our change in y over change in x, and the b, the constant, is that y-intercept, the starting part of our line, the point on the y-axis where the line crosses the y-axis, the y value when x is 0, okay? In order to write an equation of a line in slope-intercept form, you must have those two key pieces of information, the slope and the y-intercept. That's what makes the line unique. All of our lines have a y and an x, or an x and a y, but it's the slope and the y-intercept that makes them special. So when we go to write our equation, I know it's going to be y equals, because it's slope-intercept form, something times x and a constant. So now we just, m is 5, so I'm going to put that in the 5 spot. That's going to be our coefficient, 5x. B is our constant, minus 3, right? B is negative plus a negative, minus 3. There's our answer. It's that simple. We go to B, y equals, our slope is negative 1/4, so negative 1/4 x. B is 8 plus 8. Just putting things into their proper place. On number 2, we're going to identify the slope and y-intercept for each of the equations below. So we're just picking out that key information. Y equals 6x minus 2, looking for my m and my b, and I just refer back to our slope-intercept form. M, our slope, is the coefficient of x, so our slope is 6. B, our y-intercept, is the constant, so it's negative 2. On B, 4x minus 5y equals 10. Well, that looks absolutely nothing like slope-intercept form, so I can't identify slope and y-intercept. I first have to change to slope-intercept form. So I must subtract 4x from both sides, make it negative 5y equals negative 4x plus 10, divide both sides by negative 5. We get y equals 4/5 x minus 2. Now that it's in slope-intercept form, I can determine the slope, which would be positive 4/5, and our y-intercept, which would be negative 2. Here we are on page 24. We're going to work on writing equations of lines. When we write these equations, we're going to write them in slope-intercept form. In order to do that, we must have slope. We've got to have the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, so we're going to give the equation of the line that goes through the ordered pair and has the given slope. After we determine the equation, we're going to go to a computer program called Desmos, and we're going to visualize to see that we did it correctly. So like we said, we must have slope and y-intercept. So I'm just going to make myself a little sort of box of information we have to fill in. Okay, so we need this info. Okay, and we're going to kind of go through and take steps to finding the equation of the line. So sort of our step 1 is going to be find slope. Find the slope. Found it. M equals negative 3. There we go. First step done. Got it. Step 2, we also need to find B. Find that y-intercept. And here's where things get a little bit challenging, is finding that y-intercept. And I want us to think about our equation of a line in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. We've got all the variables there, 4 different letters. We want to find specifically what b is. That's the one we want. Okay? In order to solve an equation with variables, we can only have one variable, which means we'll have to substitute in for the other 3. Well, m, we know, and then that just leaves x and y. They give us an ordered pair, So we're given an x and y coordinate to substitute in for. So that's what we're going to do. Substitute in our y. Y is 2. M is -3. X is -4. And we don't know b. That's what we're going to solve for it. So that stays the variable. So we have 2 equals -3 times -4 is +12. Subtract 12 from both sides. And we've got -10 is equal to b. So now we know our y-intercept, our b, is -10. Step 2, complete. That just leaves step 3, to write the equation in y equals mx plus b form. That's slope-intercept form. And we are just substituting in for m and b. Just for m and b. Okay? Leave the x and the y as unknowns, right? We always graph an equation y equals mx plus b, like y equals 4x minus 2. We're just substituting in for the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, so when we do that, like I said, y equals, our m is -3, -3x, then our y-intercept, which is -10. And that's our answer. We box it. Now, some people might say, but Ms. Dasso, we didn't use that x and the y, the point they gave us. Yes, we did. We used it to help us find our y-intercept. It does not go in that final equation. It was a piece there for us to use as a tool to find our y-intercept, a clue to solving the case. Okay. Now we're going to grab our computers, go to Desmos.com and take a look at the visual. We're going to www.desmos.com. It's a free online graphing app. It's a lot of fun to play with. So once you get there, we're going to click Start Graphing. Okay, and it brings us up to a big coordinate plane. Over here, we're going to type in our equation, which we just solved for. Y equals -3x minus 10. And it gives us this line here. We can see our x coordinates, our y coordinates, and we want to check that we do have that proper slope of -3 and that it goes through the point -4, 2. So if we look here, I hover over this point here, I can see our line does go through -4, 2. And let's see, I'll find another point where it goes perfectly through, which I see. Let's see, right there, -3, 1. Okay, and if I look at that, going from -4, 2 to -3, 1, we do have that slope of -3. Our second problem winds up being a lot more involved because we don't have the slope given to us. We have just the 2 ordered pairs, and we need to use those to find both the slope and the y-intercept. So give the equation of the line that goes through the following ordered pairs, -1, -5, and -4, -3. After you determine the equation, we'll check it on Desmos. So I'm going to make my little box again of info I need. We need the slope, we need the y-intercept, and I'm going to call that key info. So again, like our work said, our first step is going to be find slope. So here's where I'm going to do my work to find the slope. We can either use our formula or we could use the table method. I'm going to model the table method, right? So I just take my ordered pairs, -1, -5, -4, -3. We know our slope is the change in y over change in x. So in my table, I'm looking for how do the y's change? What's the pattern? How do they go from -5 to -3? Well, you added 2. So there's going to be a +2 up top. What's the change in x? How are you going from -1 to -4? You're subtracting 3. So a -3 on the bottom. So our slope is -2/3. Okay, and you can write the negative in the numerator or the denominator. We know I like it in the numerator, so -2/3. There's our slope. And now we're going to move on to part 2. Right? Part 2, find B. find that y-intercept. So we use that equation, y equals mx plus b. We're going to solve for b. We know the slope now, negative 2/3. Now I have to choose another point for our x and our y. It does not matter which one we choose because our coefficient is negative 2/3. If there is an x that's a multiple of 3, I'd probably choose that pair. There's not, so I'm just going to use this guy for our x and y there. So that makes y negative 5, right? Our slope is negative 2/3. Our x is negative 1 plus b. So that's going to be negative 5 equals positive 2/3 plus b. So we'll subtract 2/3 from both sides. Negative 5 minus 2/3, right? I'm thinking team game. That's more negatives. It's like we're adding them. That's going to be 5 and 2/3. Negative 5 and 2/3 for our b value. Now, it's strange for us to have a b value that's a fraction, but we're using a graphing calculator to graph, so that's okay. Right? I wouldn't ask you to graph that by hand, but that's okay for here. Negative 5 and 2/3. Okay? And then we've got our final step, which is step 3. We are going to write the equation. And we're going to substitute into that y equals mx plus b form. So we leave the y, substitute in our slope, negative 2/3, leave the x, and then our y-intercept, negative 5 and 2/3. And now we'll take a moment to go check on Desmos. All right, so we're back here on Desmos. We're going to type in our equation, y equals negative 2/3, and it's really intuitive with the fractions, which is great. X minus 5 and 2/3. Well, that's not great. There we go. So there's our line. I see that nice negative slope. And now let's check our points. So we want to check negative 1, negative 5. And let's see, there's our negative 1. I just zoomed in so I could see there a little bit better. Okay, so negative 1, negative 5 right there. So that checks that point. And then our second point was negative 4, negative 3. Boom, right there. So we did a great job with our equation of our line, just confirms it for us. As you go on to do page 25 for your classwork today, it's going to be very important that you're using your notes as a guide or replaying this video for the different problems. So if we go to page 25 and I see number 1, I'm finding the equation of the line with the 2 points. Well, I'm going to use our second example as a guide. If on number 2, I'm finding the equation of a line given the slope and the point, I'm going to use number 1 as a guide. Okay? Our directions say after you determine each equation, graph it on Desmos and then find the given points. That's for you to do on your own. You don't need to send me a picture of Desmos. That's just for you to get feedback and to have some fun with the program. Okay? If you choose not to, I'll never know. But I want to go down here to number 3 because it's a little different than what we did. Find the equation of the line and the missing value. So there's 2 parts. Find the equation of the line. That's part 1. Find the missing value. That's part 2. After you determine the equation, we can check on Desmos, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So we have a slope, a point, and part of a point. So that's our missing value. But part 1 is still find the line. So I'm going to start with that first step of find the slope. Oh, I found it. It's right there. It's 4. So I know m equals 4. Now I need to find my b for that key info to write my line. So that one's done. Now I'm going to find my y-intercept. Remember, I'm substituting into y equals mx plus b. We know the slope, I can substitute that in. We need an x and a y. What ordered pair would I use? Would I use 1, -1, where I have both an x and a y? Or 4 blank, where there's a missing one? I'm going to use the one I know. Use the one where we have an x and a y. Substitute in. -1 equals 4 times 1 plus b. -1 equals 4 plus b. Subtract 4 from both sides. -5 equals b. I found b. b is -5. Woo! Step 2 done. Now we go to step 3. Write the equation. Right? We got y equals mx plus b. Leave the y. Substitute in for m. Leave the x. Then our b. Y equals 4x minus 5. Box that. That's your answer to part 1. Part 1 answer. Done. Check. Okay? Now we go to part 2. Okay? In part 2, we're going to find that missing value. How am I going to find that missing value? I'm going to use the equation. Right? So I go to part 2. I'm going to use the equation we're given. Y equals 4x minus 5. That's an x. We're missing a y. So I'll substitute into x. Then we can solve for y. So y equals 16 minus 5. Y equals 11. There's our missing value. That's our part 2. Okay, so we had 2 separate parts for that. Solve the equation, find the missing value. Oh, look at B, m equals 0. What kinds of lines have a slope of 0? Horizontal lines. Okay, a little bit of a curveball there. Today's math jokes for mathy folks, another great one from Harrison Galinas. Thank you for sharing. A student says to a thermometer, "How do you keep warm in a cold room?" Thermometer says, "You go to the corner because it's always 90 degrees. Boom. All right, guys, have a great day.